Usually on this channel I nerd out about fonts, logos, and all things design, but today I want to take a closer look at the tools of the trade, actually a single tool, perhaps the most overlooked and underappreciated on any creative professional's desk, the humble mouse. For all the emphasis given to the performance of the latest CPUs and graphics cards, ultimately the mouse is the main physical connection between designer and computer. For some developers, writers, and spreadsheet jockeys, the keyboard might be the weapon of choice. 90% of their job can be done without involving a cursor, but for a large group of creatives, not only designers, it's in fact the opposite. The mouse is mightier than the keyboard. My left hand might be hovering around the Command and Shift key, ready for a keyboard shortcut, but the mouse is doing the heavy lifting. I could lose basically everything east of the F key and still get through a whole working day. That's why the pitifully small selection of truly adequate mice for creative professionals is so frustrating. A perfect example, Apple just released their new Mac Studio and Studio Display aimed squarely at creatives like video editors, designers, and 3D artists. And yes, I was seduced and bought a shiny new box. But to control this new hotshot workstation, what are Apple offering? The Magic Mouse, or Cockroach Mouse if you prefer, since when it dies you have to flip it onto its back to recharge, has been around since 2015, and the big change this year is that it's now available in black for an additional $20. But its biggest issue isn't just the ludicrous charging in both senses, it's the fact that the soap bar is an ergonomic nightmare. This was the standard issue mouse in multiple design studios where I've worked over the years, and like a cockroach, I wanted to smash that thing. It's so notoriously uncomfortable, in fact, that you can buy accessories like this stick-on silicone goiter to try to make it more functional. But to be fair, Apple nailed one thing with the cockroach mouse: horizontal scrolling. Sure, those multi-touch gestures are cute, but the killer feature? Scrolling this way and that way. For creating content, the two main paradigms that software tends toward are timelines and canvases. For timelines, the benefit of horizontal scroll is obvious. Most of what you'll be doing is scrubbing that timeline backwards and forwards. For everything from photo retouching to illustration to logo design, you're working with the canvas, and you're spending a lot of time zoomed in on one area to focus on those details, moving around as well as zooming out to get context and seeing how things are coming together. Unfortunately, since the generic optical mouse settled on its basic template in the early 2000s, the majority of actual innovation in mouse design has only focused on one group of users: gamers. And look, nothing against gaming. If you want your mouse to have 6 RGB zones, knock yourself out. The problem is that the needs of gamers and the needs of creatives when it comes to mice are not the same and are frequently at odds. For shooters, gamers want an ultra-sensitive mouse that is as light as possible. They want to whip across the screen from one target to the next, but for creatives like designers, giving it an extremely light shell is actually going to make it harder to make smooth gestures. For RPG and strategy gamers, you get the macro mouse, covered in extra buttons for shortcuts to spell slots and items, but those shortcut keys are not particularly useful in apps like Photoshop or After Effects, since you'd quickly run out of space to map the right hotkeys for your specific workflow. Just take copy and paste. Adobe Illustrator doesn't have just a single paste function, it in fact has 6 different paste functions, so a macro mouse doesn't really add much utility. What creatives really need in a mouse is high precision cursor control, great vertical and horizontal scrolling, all-day comfortable use, and a modern professional aesthetic. For a basic checklist, it's surprisingly difficult to achieve. For many, the MX Master series from Logitech is the best mouse on the market. They're designed for a full-size adult hand, have a dedicated horizontal scroll wheel on the side, and can even charge without adopting the cockroach position. Except for some inextricable reason, Logitech and their imitators decided that to distinguish these as premium productivity mice, the scroll wheel would have to be made of knurled metal, which certainly looks nice in a promo video, but doesn't make my top 10 list of surfaces I wish to scrape my fingertips over on a daily basis. True story, I had to abandon my coveted MX Master because I've developed contact dermatitis on my index and ring fingers, which as a designer is the equivalent of a sprinter getting a broken pinky toe or a trumpeter getting a permanent cold sore. Yes, it's a minor injury, but it's in a critical location. But Linus, you say, what about insert alternative pointing device here? Well, in a nutshell, I've tried them and they just weren't for me. Wacom drawing tablets are great for some, particularly people who do illustration, but for me it takes up way too much desk space and also becomes tiring to hold a stylus for long periods of time. Trackpads, trackballs, and vertical mice were all too imprecise or awkward for their own reasons individually. I really wanted the vertical mouse to be the answer since that handshake position is much more comfortable for the wrist, but there's a reason why we move on from holding crayons like this in preschool to writing with our palm face down. It's just more precise. So since I gave up the MX Master, I've been using another Logitech mouse as a temporary placeholder, but it turns out there are literally no better options for sale. My question is, why can't I buy a better mouse? Especially in the US where consumer choice appears to be written into the Constitution. I mean, this entire grocery aisle is nothing but different flavors of boxed mac and cheese. Why is there such a lack of market innovation? So here are 3 proposed solutions. First, Apple could create a Magic Mouse fit for the human hand. Look, the reign of Johnny Ive is over. You can actually give customers form and function. And while you're at it, you could put the charge port at the top of the mouse, like the MX Master. Look, it even works when it's being charged. Speaking of which, Logitech's MX Master is very good, but it could be even better. The current model is the 3rd edition. For the 4th, why not add some basic customization? At least give users some choice of material when it comes to the scroll wheel. I'm sure that many people really love the metal rasp effect, but especially for those of us with allergies or skin conditions, an alternative would be really appreciated. Lastly, all of this leaves me wondering why there isn't such a thing as a custom-built mouse scene. If you're unfamiliar with the custom mechanical keyboard scene, Answers in Progress has a great overview video, but in a nutshell, for someone who spends the majority of their day at a keyboard, if you are willing to spend upwards of $1,000, you can build the keyboard of your dreams. You can make it clickety-clack exactly the way you like best, with the ideal heft and a color scheme that perfectly complements your setup. You can even have a small diorama hidden in your escape key. The sky's the limit. With mice, about $120 is the limit. The MX Master is the most expensive, feature-rich, non-gaming mouse you can buy. There is literally nothing better available. The original was released like the Apple Mouse in 2015, and since then they've made a few tweaks to battery, sensor, and side-scrolling, and the competition have responded with virtually nothing. So, hackers, makers, 3D printing gurus, here is my ask. Could you spare a few table crumbs from the custom keyboard scene for we lowly mouse jockeys? All we need to get started is a platform, an open source PCB for plug-and-play sensor, switch, and scroll wheel swapping, and a shared platform would also allow the mouse shell to be 3D printed in a variety of shapes and sizes to precisely fit your hand and the grip that you prefer. Consider the possibilities. Creatives and gamers alike would benefit.
And there was much rejoicing.
Look, I'd even learn to solder if it meant I could have some control over the design of the very thing that helps me to design. After all, whatever the tool of your trade, you're going to be spending more of your waking hours with it in your hand than not. And if that isn't worth investing in, I don't know what is. That's all I've got to say about mice, except, did you know that the first mainstream scroll wheel was on the IntelliMouse in 1996 from Microsoft? I have a whole video about Microsoft's most important fonts, which you can watch straight after this one. Thanks for watching, and thank you to my fantastic supporters over on Patreon. My name is Linus. See you next time.